Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to our next and, in fact, final strategic wellbeing webinar session of the year, which is all very exciting. It has gone very quickly, but it's been a really enjoyable series. Really liked doing it this year, actually. So I hope those of you who have been to multiple ones of these have also found it to be of benefit. Um, we still got a few people coming in, so I'll just do the introductions and a bit of the housekeeping, and then I'll hand over to Amanda to get started. Um, we'll try and keep things to around about 30 minutes, as we usually do. Invariably, we always stretch over by a minute or two, so if you need to go, it's not a problem. As ever, it's always really useful just to pop things that you might want to talk about or speak about in the chat as well. We've also got a Q&A button and a chat section. So if you've got anything that you'd like to ask either during or at the end of the session, please do. Please pop it in there. Excuse me. And I will monitor it and fire a few of your questions at Amanda. We'll see if we can get her brain whirring a little bit. So just briefly by way of introductions, my name's Harry. I am the founder of Smart Clinic. We're an occupational health business. The majority of you who are on this call will probably be on our mailing list, so you'll probably know that already. And I'm joined by Amanda, who is the founder and my counterpart over at People First, who I will let Amanda do her own introductions in just a second. Amanda and I have been working together in one way or another for quite a few years now. We have a few common interests, one of them, of course, being well-being, but interestingly, another one of them being motorsport. So it's always good to have a good catch-up with Amanda too. For those of you who don't know, she's a frustratingly competent and fast racing driver. So she's impressive in more ways than one. But
Thanks, Harry.
That's enough of the introductions. I won't make Amanda's head too big. And I will hand over to Amanda. I'm very much looking forward to this session. And as I say, please do pop any comments or questions or anything like that in the chat, and we'll go through them as we go along. Over to you, Amanda.
Oh, thanks, Harry, for such a warm introduction. I owe you one. Thank you very much. It is quite amazing that we're now on our 7th strategic wellbeing webinar. I really don't understand where all that time's gone, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it too. So let's get some dates in the diary for next year so we can continue it. I'll start off with an introduction just in case you don't know who I am. I'm Amanda Anderson and the founder of People First. People First offer tailored wellbeing services to help support you and your employees, whether it's from individual employee support through workshops and webinars, or even supporting your leaders to help have wellbeing conversations and supporting their own wellbeing. We are here to help. So we do offer a wide range of services, and it'd be great to connect with anybody that's interested in finding out more. Today's session, I hope, will offer you an opportunity to sit and think and reflect on workplace wellbeing. We're heading into the final month of 2024. Time does fly. And I wanted to give you an opportunity today to think about what you want 2025 to look like. So I'll be doing this in a very strategic way today, using a framework inspired by a SWOT analysis. I don't want you to delve too deeply into the small bits of detail. I want you to think big today. And it's very rare that we have that opportunity to just stop and think. So my invitation to you is think about these questions through the lens of what if. I do think it would be handy to have a piece of paper and a pen so you can jot things down. But if you do prefer more digital notes, then maybe a Word document or something so you can jot down a few ideas. So we're here because employee wellbeing is the foundation of a healthy, thriving workplace. And when your employees feel supported, valued, and are mentally and physically well, they are more engaged, they're more productive, and they are more motivated. So how well have you achieved that in 2024? If you were to give yourself a rating, 1 being low and 10 being high, where would you put yourself? Just jot that number down. In today's session, we're going to have some time to reflect. I'd like you to reflect on what your current workplace wellbeing is like and how might it look different into 2025. And we're going to explore some ideas today. And if you feel brave enough, then you can always share your thinking in the chat. If not, jot a few things down. But I would love to discuss or support you further after today's session if you do have any further questions. So let's start off with reflecting on 2024. If we're looking back on this year, what are your thoughts and feelings about how 2024 has been? What wellbeing initiatives have worked well for your employees? And what challenges have you encountered? And I'm actually today going to put a timer on, and I'm going to give you a minute to contemplate about those two questions. Just have a think. I think it's always important when we're looking at these things to celebrate our wins and celebrate our successes. Because if you're leading anything and you're a little bit like me, we're always thinking about what is the next step? What can I do better? What's not working? And how can I drive that forward? But actually stopping and thinking about what is working and having an understanding of why that is working well really does set you up to be able to plan for the future. Having an idea of the challenges that you've been facing and potentially starting to think about how you can support your employees next year will guide your strategy for the year ahead. So, we recently asked 50 educators what's their workplace wellbeing. Sorry, let me start again. We recently asked 50 educators what they would do with a magic wand to support their workplace wellbeing. Can you predict what they said? Jot a couple of ideas down if you've got some and you didn't see them in the screen beforehand. Okay, so when we asked 50 educators what they would change to improve wellbeing in their schools and their settings, there were 5 key themes that came up. Let's have a look at them. Firstly, reducing workload stress. Secondly, improving access to mental health resources, fostering a supportive culture, encouraging peer support, and prioritizing work-life balance. So I wonder, what would your employees say if you asked them the same question? Maybe there's an invitation to ask them and find out what they say. So now let's dream a little bit. Imagine you have that magic wand and you could change anything about your workplace support around wellbeing. What would you do? This is your moment to think about big challenges, whether it's creating a supportive culture or introducing new mental health initiatives. If you had one wish, one magic wand, what would you choose to use it on? If you feel comfortable doing so, it'd be absolutely amazing if you could share that in the chat box. And I'd love to see what you would use your special magic wand on to change for 2025. I'm really intrigued. So we've got some improving flexible working, and supporting work-life balance, key themes that are coming up a lot actually. Access to coaching, CBT, mindfulness for every employee. That would be amazing. And thank you very much for those that have shared it. Collaborative working, especially together in person. Yes, a lot of people now are wanting to encourage more in the moment togetherness. I know from our background, we've working with organisations that want more face-to-face training and support rather than it being over on Teams. More personal accountability for own well-being. I think that's a really important thing to discuss actually. Employees have to have a form of accountability for their own own well-being completely. And enhance manager capabilities to support their teams. And how often do we actually support leaders to support having those well-being conversations? I know through my own experience, you get promoted and it's just an assumption that you then have the skill set to be able to support your employees with whatever issues come their way. So yeah, completely. A culture of supervision lead and modelled by leaders. Modelling from leaders is absolutely essential. They have to be leading by example. And somehow we've got to encourage leaders to put well-being on the table and to be doing that on a day-to-day basis. So thank you very much for everybody that has shared their thoughts about how they want to use their magic wand. So thank you very much. In terms of key areas, actually, some of the ones that I mentioned in terms of the educators when we asked them have been also coming up within what's been shared on the chat. So if we were to have a little look at these, could your organisation benefit from enhancing employee engagement? Maybe reducing stress and burnout or fostering a culture of psychological safety. And I just encourage you to take a moment to consider what would be the biggest opportunity within your organisation. Where would that growth lie? What's going to make the biggest difference to that workplace culture? When we're exploring enhancing employee engagement, we offer a wide range of services to support that. For example, our work and wellbeing coaching. And maybe you attended the last webinar, which was focusing on work and wellbeing coaching, but targeting conversations, whether it's an external organisation like People First offering work and wellbeing coaching, or supporting the leaders in your organisation to have those conversations around wellbeing is vitally important. And it does help your employees engage in terms of conversation around stress, in terms of work-life balance, managing priorities. And it can help you have a much deeper connection to their roles and, ultimately the impact that they have on your organisation. And it can have a significant impact on motivation and the performance of your teams. If we're looking at reducing stress and burnout, we offer a wide range of workshops, but how often do we teach our employees how to manage stress, how they can build their own resilience, and how they can manage their time effectively? If I think back to our first webinar, which was on the assumptions that we make, quite often we make the assumptions that people have those well-being skills. And somebody earlier mentioned around taking responsibility for those for our own personal well-being. And that is essential, but we can't make the assumption that they have the tools to do that. So working with an organisation like People First that offer workshops and training can really help support your employees with those skills. And also gearing up to support leaders to be able to identify the early signs of burnout or the early signs of somebody that's under stress and giving them the practical tools to be able to support them on a day-to-day basis also really helps your organisation. Fostering psychological safety is a little passion of mine. It's something that I find really, really interesting and insightful. So working with your leaders, do they understand how to build trust with their colleagues, how to build rapport, how to be able to balance that challenge and support conundrum? If you've got high support, you can have high challenge. But providing a space where employees can speak openly and not worry about what they say and how it might be taken is vitally important. And often leaders in the workplace get promoted and don't necessarily have the support to develop those softer skills that are needed to support our employees. So you might want to consider training, thinking about key soft skills like active listening or developing empathy or emotional intelligence. And that can really help your leaders to create an environment where employees do feel safe to voice their concerns, share their ideas, and just collaborate without that fear of judgment or having negative consequences. We mentioned also on the chat about priorities and work-life balance, and that's really hard sometimes to get that balance and understanding how we can create boundaries around our work and our life to ensure that we can get that balance. And that's another area where work and wellbeing coaching can help. So setting clear boundaries, understanding how to prioritize tasks, and embracing some flexibility within your working arrangements that you have is vitally important. So we can do this by integrating wellbeing conversations in our day-to-day approach, and how we instill that within the culture, how we're checking in with each other to ensure that we're getting that necessary work-life balance so that we can sustain our productivity and also our job satisfaction. So hopefully there's a few little ideas there that you might be able to take forward for your wellbeing strategy for 2025. I did mention when we started around a SWOT analysis. So thinking about strengths and weaknesses. And we've started that process already. And I'm just going to give you a moment longer to reflect on what is your organisation at the moment doing really well in terms of well-being. And also the different slants now is more around what are the barriers that are preventing your success? What barriers are in the way? What's holding you back from getting that culture that you really desire or really want to try and achieve? I'm just going to let you pause for a minute. And I just want to thank Alison, Chantel, and Rita for sharing their three, and they're very common three that come up a lot actually: funding, time, and resistance to change. Now, funding's a really interesting one. So thinking about potentially having a low budget, what can you do that's high impact and low cost strategies is the key starting one on that one. In terms of time, somehow we've got to make time, creating time or thinking about how we can reutilize that time. And resistance to change, I hear that so often. And that's around trying to encourage employees to have buy-in and really getting them involved in the process, asking them what is it that they need support with or what would make a difference within your organization. And having that open communication, I think, is vitally important. So thank you very much for sharing those three. So what I'd like to do is almost have a commitment of making 2025 your best year yet. So as we wrap this reflection up, I'd like you to think about if you were to fast forward 12 months and you're sat in this same webinar in 12 months' time, what would you like to be different? And what support might you need to make that happen? I want to give some time for Q&A today, Harry, because that's the bit that so many people say they really enjoy. So I hope that today's session has given you a moment to stop and reflect, thinking about what's gone well this year and what you can put in place for next year. If you want to reach out and have discussions with either Harry or I, please do so. Other than that, I'm going to get us into the Q&A part of today's webinar. If you have any particular questions, please fire them away. If you have something that's specific for you, then please feel free to book in a consultation with me and we can talk through that. So, Harry, do we have any questions in the Q&A today?
We had one on registration that I'm going to fire to you in just a second, because actually the theme has come up quite a few times already during this session, so I think it's particularly pertinent. But before we get on to that, I've got one of my own that I would like to ask, because it's more of a follow-up from Jen's comment earlier. Jen, you mentioned in your comments about enhanced manager capability, and I think that is also something actually that Amanda, you've referenced quite a few times, and it's something personally in my career I've observed quite a lot, but it's also something that you see time and time again. When people are promoted through their careers, they're usually promoted off the back of their own individual performance in their particular discipline. So a teacher might get promoted to be a head of department, then an assistant head teacher, then a head teacher, for example. An HR advisor might get promoted to be an HR business partner, to then be an HR manager, to then be an HR director, for example. And usually that's because they're particularly good at their job, not necessarily because they're particularly good managers. They have to learn the management bit as they go on through their career. And of course, one of those management bits, and I can very much empathize with this because I've been through the same career path too. One of the bits of being a manager, of course, is about promoting well-being and promoting good cultures within your team. So I'd be interested to gain your thoughts, Amanda, on to what extent do you think it is solely the manager's job to promote well-being, part of the manager's job, or perhaps not at all any part of the manager's job and they're just guiding? What's your take on a manager's role in terms of promoting well-being?
I think it's a really interesting concept, actually, Harry, because ultimately, when we're talking about leaders, leaders are leading people. And in order to lead people, those people need to be healthy. They need to be, thriving in their role to achieve their best. And for me, the role of a leader is to get the best out of the people that they serve. And that for me comes with, strategically sitting down and thinking, how do I develop trust and rapport with this colleague? How am I going to get the best out of them? So for me, well-being conversations are part of those conversations to ensure that they're thriving. And you hear it so often, people get promoted because they're good at their job, but not necessarily because they're good at leading people. And it's not a skill that comes easily to many, if I'm honest with you. And being able to have those well-being conversations, or even being able to develop relationships to get the best out of people, is a focal point for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting to hear. And the other question, actually, which was one that was put on the registration form, but do you know what? It has been asked and commented on quite a lot already, so it's really relevant. It's all about funding and money. It's usually the
Yeah,
bottleneck in these circumstances, isn't it? Money and time.
yeah.
So acknowledging that we all have limited resources, sadly, none of us have totally infinite resources. When you're on a limited budget, in your view, Amanda, kind of what can we do to try and promote any wellbeing initiatives? What types of things can we do? Either just us directly ourselves as organizations, or perhaps outsourcing proportions of that to specialists such as People First. What kind of services do you have that are also going to be, not break the bank?
Uh, it is something that comes up a lot. Obviously, funding's fundamental, and I can sit here and say, "Oh, come to People First and spend loads of money." But realistically, I think there are two key things when we're looking at high impact and low cost. I would be focusing on communication within the organisation, and I'd also be focusing on recognition. And they're two things that can really start a well-being strategy off. So recognizing success and celebrating success doesn't cost any money, but gives people a boost because they know that they're valued, they know that they're going to be supportive and they're being celebrated. And that's part of the culture that we can create. And I think also communication skills and how we communicate within an organization can also be tackled fairly low cost. Yes, you can invest in training for leaders in terms of communication skills, but having a culture where you can have an open dialogue, where people can discuss their issues, their concerns without feeling they're going to be judged or, taken the mickey of, having those open, trusting relationships that are, promoting conversations around workload. How are you finding your workload at the moment? What's your biggest challenge today? That conversation that a leader can have with that one sentence, what's your biggest challenge, can make somebody feel like somebody's listening, somebody cares, and that doesn't cost you any money. That's effectively free on a day-to-day basis. So having leaders that can model well-being conversations and engage in it, I think, is vitally important. But just small changes, small little steps can take you a long way. Do you have any to add on that, actually, Harry, while we're talking about it?
I would certainly echo what you said. I think in my view, there's sometimes, not always, but I think sometimes there can actually be an inverse relationship between the cost of an initiative financially and the effectiveness that it can have in terms of well-being. I often, for anyone who's had the misfortune of having to listen to one of my talks in the past, I often sort of take the mickey out of initiatives like Pizza Fridays and 2-for-1 cinema tickets and, discounts off stuff and things. There's nothing wrong with them, nothing wrong with them at all. But I think we have to recognize them for what they're for, which is perks and benefits, not well-being initiatives. What they also are generally is hugely expensive. I know pizza might not be that expensive, but, if you start going down the route of freebies, things can get very expensive. And they're great for motivation and benefits and perhaps employer branding, but realistically, are they the things that are actually going to make a difference to the well-being and culture of your workforce? Probably not. Probably what's going to make much more difference is actually the things where you're investing time and effort into stuff. And time and effort, other than the cost per hour, are free. Now, you might need the skills in order to know how to best use that time and effort, and that's what people like Amanda are there for. But sitting down and having that conversation the right way for 10 or 15 minutes will have a much bigger impact on somebody's health and well-being for the next month than giving them a free cinema voucher. So I would say that if you're limited to either time or funding, go with time. And it's about learning how to use that time. I think that's a much more precious commodity and much more precious resource, and probably a much more appreciated one for your employees as well. I've got one more question that Maria's put on the chat. It's a really interesting question, actually, and it's one that I hadn't thought of, but I'm really curious to hear the answer to, or at least your answer to it, Amanda. So Maria said, how do managers lead on creating psychological safety? Do you have any examples? And how would employees contribute to this? And this is the bit I find really interesting. And how do the people team help with that? The reason I find that interesting is just last night I saw a post on LinkedIn and it said all of the things that HR is not. HR probably being another euphemism for the people team. And one of those things is we are not a miracle cure to make everybody well. We are also not able to miraculously change the business culture in one day. And I think that's so true. All of these things do take time and they're subtle incremental changes. But from your point of view, Amanda, what interaction do you think that HR and the line managers and the people themselves all have in fostering sort of this well-being culture of an organization? To slightly paraphrase Maria's question, anyway.
Yeah, I'm not normally very good with questions within questions within questions, so I'll try and answer it the best I can, to be honest. Psychological safety is something that I think most leaders, when they get promoted to like middle leadership or even senior leadership, never really stop to even think about or are even aware of the concept. So I think starting off with, it's ensuring that your leaders understand what psychological safety is. And then putting in a framework of, okay, in my organization, this is how we're going to try and create that psychological safety. For me, it starts with leaders being open, having conversations around how we receive feedback and how we give feedback. how we want to have that relationship with our colleagues, how we build trust, and how we build trust with employees is different. You know, how I build trust with Harry in a relationship can be very different to how I build trust with somebody else. And people have different building blocks. If you think about trust, building trust as a house, people have different building blocks that mean different things to them. So leaders having conversations with their direct reports about how do we build this relationship and seeing it as something that's strategic, I think is key. Does that answer the question, Harry? Just thinking about it, I do have a couple of blogs on our website around building psychological safety, which you might find useful.
So yeah, and I think what I would add to that in my experience as well, and I'm not sure, Maria, what your role is. I don't know whether you are people team or whether you are management or maybe perhaps both in this context. But I think what I would probably add to that is that an HR department or a people team generally are actually not the ones responsible. They're not the senior, that's not the leadership team, excuse me, that's not the leadership team of an organization. The HR director is not the CEO. The HR director or the people director is just that. They're the head of a people team. So they're there to advise, they're there to influence, they're there perhaps to put in strategic initiatives that are going to help the people element of an organization, but it's not a people team's responsibility to transform a company's culture overnight. It's a people's team to help everybody work together to transform a culture. So that, in my view, that's where the people team would sit within that particular realm. And I don't think too much pressure should be placed on an HR department or a people team to be the answer or the miracle cure, because I don't think that's realistic. But certainly they are there to advise and perhaps put in initiatives, or at least recommend initiatives that are going to help. So I always think it's very useful for people teams to be familiar with these concepts and be able to advise accordingly. Yeah, hopefully that's a bit of a dual answer to your question, but hopefully that helps a little bit. I'm conscious we've run over time, but I think I saw another question pop up just a minute ago. Yes, Rita. So Rita has asked, how can a company have a successful wellbeing strategy and implement practices effectively across diverse cultures and multi-country companies? Can it be unified strategy, or shall it be specific as per each country's culture? Now, that is a really interesting topic. I've worked for a multinational company myself, and it was tricky, but actually fun, because you do have the opportunity to learn about other people's cultures. So here at Smart Clinic, for example, we've got a couple of members of staff who are Indian, and they celebrate things like Diwali, and I love it. It's not something I know much about, and I get really interested by it. And we really like to celebrate their way of living in the company as well. So I find it very interesting. But to bring it back to more the well-being point, yes, it's certainly an interesting concept, and it's very tricky. What do you think, Amanda?
It's something that I think we could probably do a whole webinar on, to be honest with you, Harry. My immediate thought goes, you can't have, well-being isn't a one-size-fits-all as a starting point, but within a well-being strategy, you can have a golden thread that can go through those cultural differences. Like, you want to support individuals to thrive and be their best, or you want them to be in a place where they feel that they can speak out and share their views. I appreciate that different cultures have different ways of interpreting that. So you're probably finding a well-being strategy that has an overarching aim that can be then put forward to different parts of that organization depending on the country and the culture, so that you're individualizing it.
Certainly, that, I mean, there's a core set of principles, aren't there, that are going to be good practices wherever you are in the world. Open communication is healthy, doesn't matter what culture you're in. Praising employees for good work, managing underperformance effectively, managing flexibility in terms of requests, having one-to-one catch-ups at appropriate times. These are things that are pertinent irrespective of culture. So there's always going to be things that are always relevant. And then there's always going to be things exactly as Amanda says that are individualized. But I think probably, you know, there's going to be more that's common across all cultures than is not, I expect. But obviously, there's always a degree of sensitivity, and what might be very acceptable practice in one place might be seen as a little offensive in other places. So there's always managing it with a degree of sensitivity and understanding what some of the local cultures and customs are, so that you are able to preempt what perhaps should be avoided in a conversation, or perhaps what should be encouraged in a conversation. But yes, it's an interesting topic. As Amanda, perhaps that's a theme for next year, Amanda. Perhaps that's something that we should do a webinar on.
Completely.
Lovely. Well, we've gone a few minutes over on time, but I think it was well worth it. There were some really interesting topics that we got the opportunity to discuss there. So for those of you who have given us a few extra minutes of your day, we really appreciate it. It's been really interesting, and I really do appreciate those of you who've taken time to ask questions, or just listening quietly and watch as well. So from my point of view, that's everything. I just want to take the opportunity to say a big thank you to Amanda for all of the time and effort that you've put into these sessions this year. I've personally found them really enlightening, and it's been really great actually to have Smart Clinic involved with people first and observe some of the fantastic work that you're doing. So yeah, thank you once again. And Amanda, I will leave you to do your closing words.
Oh, thank you very much, Harry. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed them, and we'll get some dates in the diary for next year. But if people that are still on board, if you've got any topics or anything that you would like us to cover within these 20-minute, 30-minute webinars for next year, please feel free to drop me an email and we can get those set in the diary. Other than that, I wish you all a good festive December and Happy New Year, and best of luck for whatever your 2025 wellbeing strategy will look like. I wish you the best of luck, and we're here to help. So get in touch if you need anything. Thank you very much, guys.